Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. 9 people dead after a vehicle rammed into a crowd at Vancouver, Canada Street Festival. Police say they're confident the tragedy was not an act of terrorism. Chris Spears reports. A cowboy hat business owner in Texas stocked up on his imported raw materials well before President Trump was elected. What he thinks about Washington's sweeping tariffs. President Trump and European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen have agreed to meet. It will be their first meeting since retaking office and comes amid trade and tariff disputes. The Department of Government Efficiency says records for millions of recipients aged 120 or older have been updated as part of a major cleanup at the Social Security Administration. Trade talks shake up the markets, but should you panic? Financial expert Lawrence Sprung says no. He shares simple steps to stay steady.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. Tragedy in Vancouver this weekend. Police there responding to a vehicle that rammed into a crowd at a local block party. The celebration of Filipino heritage turned into a crime scene with bodies strewn on the street. And NTD's Chris Spears joins us right now to give us the latest. What do you have, Chris?
Don, Vancouver police say 9 people were killed in this tragedy. Before I go any further, I want to warn our audience that some of the images you'll see on screen are graphic and intense to watch. This vehicle was driven into a crowd that was on Saturday evening at a Filipino street festival. Police arrested a 30-year-old local man at the scene, saying that they actually knew about him for a while. Here's Interim Police Chief of Vancouver, Steve Rye.
That male was taken into custody at the scene by the crowd. It was a Filipino community event. The crowd immediately called police. We then took custody of the subject, and he is now in our custody being held.
Police later said that they were confident this was not an act of terrorism. It happened shortly after 8 p.m. on Saturday at the Lapu-Lapu Day block party, which celebrates a Filipino national hero. About 15 people were seen on the ground by an eyewitness who also said that they saw a dark SUV driven by a male. Vancouver City Councillor Pete Fry was visibly shaken as he spoke to CTV News.
Okay, Chris.
I don't even know what to say. This was a great day. Wonderful event. Huge community event. And to have it end in tragedy like this, it won't break us or the community, but it's horrible.
So you can see him visibly shaken, just an intense moment right there after this event. Reaction coming in from around the world. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that he was devastated to hear about the horrific events. King Charles says he's profoundly saddened to learn of the dreadful attack, and the President of the Philippines saying that he's completely shattered. This comes just one day before Canada's federal elections tomorrow, Don.
Okay, Chris, thanks for the update. Let's switch gears a little bit right here. Tell us about the explosion in a port in southern Iran.
Right, so in southern Iran, there was a blast at the largest commercial port there. That was Saturday morning. Authorities are saying that 800 people have been injured, 25 killed, 6 people are missing. And of course, these numbers are all still coming into focus as authorities respond to this event that happened about 24 hours ago. Hospitals there are filling up. The authorities declared a state of emergency, and witnesses said that they could feel this blast over 30 miles away. What's interesting here is that private security firm Ambry says the blast was linked to the improper handling of missile fuel chemicals, a shipment that came to Iran from China, of all places. The shipment was first reported in January by the Financial Times, so there is some corroboration to this. And it comes, of course, as the US and Iran are engaged in the first direct diplomatic talks in a decade. It's unclear how exactly this blast could affect those talks, if at all, Don.
Okay, Chris, lastly, a lot has happened in the U.S. trade war with China over the past week. What's the latest on that?
Okay, so tensions seem to be cooling ever so slightly in this very hot trade war. Trump says the U.S. and China are talking, but China denies this. However, on the other hand, we have reports of China reducing tariffs on certain U.S. imports of semiconductors to zero, despite the 125% tariffs on other products coming from the U.S. The United States, of course, has a 145% tariff on products coming from China. And Trump said en route to the funeral for Pope Francis in Rome that he will not drop tariffs on China unless they offer the United States something substantial. Here is Trump speaking on what he'd like to see from China.
Well, free up China, let us go in and work China because, frankly, that's what we wanted last time. We almost got it, and then they backed out of that deal. But we had it to go into China and to sell our product, sell our wares. In other words, it's called to open China. That would be great. That would be a big win. But I'm not even sure I'm going to ask for it because they don't want it open.
Don, if the United States and China don't strike a deal, the results could be devastating for the Chinese regime. Kyle Bass, founder and CIO of Heyman Capital Management, says that China's economy is in fact right now collapsing. He cites the country's investment in its struggling real estate sector. And of course, that's without these tariffs and this heightened trade war that far overshadows the trade war between the United States and China during Trump's first term. Economists for the U.S., the impact economists say that, of course, the U.S. could see higher prices, though increased investment in the U.S. due in part to Trump's tariffs could boost American manufacturing in the United States, Don.
Well, all right, Chris, as always, thank you.
Absolutely.
Next, Jerry Cook, the owner of Master Hatters Texas, invested in a stockpile of material for his hat-making company even before President Trump was elected. He said he's well placed ahead of the competition even as tariffs roll out. Take a look.
Cowboy hat-making company Master Hatters of Texas had a master plan well before President Donald Trump announced global tariffs. Jerry Cook is the owner of the Garland, Texas-based hat maker.
We felt like that Trump was going to win the election. And so what we did is that we started buying extra material from different places because none of our raw material comes from the United States. These bags on this first shelf up here, they all came from mainland China. So we felt like, well, if he puts this big tariff on all of these countries, we'll have raw material that we can work all the way to next October. And then that would put us in a position actually to be better than our competitors.
Cook sees Trump's tariffs as a long-term benefit and, in the meantime, ups production costs for his competition.
They're buying product made in Mexico or China or wherever it's made at, and it's totally made. And it's very inexpensive. And it's what we call a costume hat. It's not the quality of what we're going to make. So if their prices go up, our prices are going to stay the same. We're making a better quality and getting better service.
Master Hatters of Texas, which makes cowboy hats for several prominent retailers and custom shops, has over 50 employees and produces dozens of hats each day. Cook says he's aligned with Trump's America First agenda and sees tariffs as a solid negotiating tool for the president.
We have a hard time with other countries shipping into Canada or shipping into Mexico because we have tariffs that they put on our product that cost our ultimate consumer more in that country. If he negotiates a better deal for us, maybe that'll mean that we'll be able to sell more product in a foreign country.
This week, the Trump administration signaled it was open to reducing sweeping tariffs on China. The Wall Street Journal, citing a White House official, said the tariffs on China could come down from their current level of 145% to between 50% and 65%.
President Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen have agreed on Saturday to meet at a later stage. Tariffs and trade are likely to be a top point of discussion. Now I'm joined by NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson in London. Malcolm, what is significant about this future meeting?
So President Trump has already met with Emmanuel Macron, France's leader, as well as Italy's leader, Giorgia Meloni. But this will be the first time that he'll be meeting Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission chief. Now, this is quite significant because the European Commission is responsible for trade for the European Union, as well as issues such as tariffs. Now, of course, the US has put a 25% tariff on car imports, as well as those for steel and aluminium. And there's also the 10% flat tariff rate for US imports that has been lowered down from 20% for the European Union. Now, the European Union has suspended retaliatory tariffs for the time being and is seeking a free trade deal or zero tariff deal on industrial goods. But this has only been met with a moderate US interest so far, so there's still quite a lot of details to resolve between the two sides. So this is likely to be part of the discussions between Trump and von der Leyen, Don.
So as well, the areas of disagreement in the relationship between Trump and the European Union, it seems, aren't limited to just tariffs. What are the other points that could be raised?
So it's not just car, steel and aluminium. It's also things such as how the EU laws impact US tech firms. Now, the EU has this law called the Digital Markets Act, which has recently led to fines for Meta, Google and Apple. Now, the European Union wants to cut down on monopolistic behavior and seeking a fairer market for smaller companies to be able to thrive, whereas these tech firms claim that the laws are being applied selectively on them and not being applied on European companies or Chinese companies. So this is part of the dispute here. Now, the Trump administration has warned that if foreign laws affect US companies like US tech firms, then those nations, which in this case would be the European Union, could face a form of retaliatory tariff. So this is likely to be another point of conversation between Trump and von der Leyen, Don.
But Malcolm, I understand it's not all contention, right? What are areas that there could be some meeting of an agreement between the US and EU?
Well, this is actually quite a good point because it's not just contention. Italy's Giorgia Meloni is angling herself. She's quite an astute politician. She's angling herself as a mediator between the United States and the European Union, since she aligns somewhat more with Trump's politics than she does with necessarily the European Union. This relationship between Meloni and Trump and the EU could foster future amelioration to disputes which the European Union could be having with the US. Now, looking forward beyond the tariff wars at the moment, there's something quite important that I think the research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, Darren Spink, has to say, which we'll play now.
My sense is once this initial trade war ends, the world is going to quickly pivot to a question of how do we maintain economic connectivity in a post-globalization world.
Now, what Mr. Spink means here is that the diversification of infrastructure initiatives. This will be a very key aspect of future relations between the US and much of the world at large. One of the points which there could be some synergy is with the development of trade corridors, such as the IMEC corridor, which is between India, the Middle East, and Europe. They would be seeking to build infrastructure and particularly focus on rare earth minerals and rare earth elements. Now, these are very important elements and materials used in all sorts of tech appliances, from the microchips in mobile phones to the guidance systems in missiles, as well as in the data centers, which are growing in use at the moment globally. Now, China controls the production of about 60 to 70% of these rare elements. And controls about 90% of the processing of them, so turning them from raw materials and into the refined single element. So, as Mr. Spink suggests, once the tariff wars finally settle down, these issues, like the rare earth elements, will be a key part of future relations, whichever way the tariffs happen to settle, Don.
Okay, Malcolm, thank you very much. Moving on, big tech has been coming under fire lately. Governments around the world are attempting to keep tech titans under control and to stop the biggest companies from diminishing or significantly eliminating competition. NTD's Sean Marshall takes a look at some of the trials that could transform the future of operations for the biggest companies.
Governments around the world are going after the biggest tech companies such as Alphabet's Google, Meta's Facebook, and Apple. Lawmakers are moving to stop the giants' monopolization of their industries. The most recent news coming out of the United States, Europe, and Japan. A federal judge branded Google an abusive monopolist, the second time in less than a year. This time it's for illegally exploiting some of its online marketing technology to boost the profits, fueling the internet empire currently worth $1.8 trillion. Google, for instance, having its internal search and app store pre-installed on Android phones, giving them complete control over competing app developers and rival advertisers. Japan is following suit in the footsteps of the US and Europe, who have already dealt out fines to Google for such controls. EU antitrust regulators earlier this month imposed the first penalties under landmark EU legislation, implementing total fines of $797 million to Apple and Meta for violating the Digital Markets Act and orders to stop anti-competitive practices. And in the U.S. this month, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg took the witness stand in a historic antitrust trial. The trial will be the first big test of President Trump's Federal Trade Commission's ability to challenge big tech. The lawsuit was filed against Meta, then called Facebook, in 2020 during Trump's first term. It claims the company bought Instagram and WhatsApp to squash competition and establish an illegal monopoly in the social media market. Also earlier this month, a federal judge in Seattle denied the online shopping giant Amazon's bid to dismiss charges brought by the Federal Trade Commission. In 2023, the FTC and the attorneys general of 17 states sued Amazon, accusing the online retailer of raising prices and creating monopolies, along with overcharging online sellers, with the FTC says alters organic search results to show paid advertisements or Amazon's own products. The judge dismissed claims brought about by 4 of the 17 states over the consumer protection and antitrust laws, but allowed all others to proceed. Amazon will have to face all 13 other states' antitrust claims. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Coming up, tips for investors wanting to get higher returns. Why a financial planning firm owner says in the market matters more than timing the market. And a heads up for those that haven't been up to date on paying their student loans. The Education Department says we'll soon start garnishing your wages or withholding tax refunds. More in just a moment here on NTD News Today after the break.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
I was a quarterback at Hardaway High School, college first-round draft pick. On and off the field, we were taught to not show any signs of weakness. During the football season, I would stop eating, but I didn't know I was depressed. I thought that something was wrong with me. For 20 plus years was physical. We didn't have any education behind what mental health was. I started to learn it starts here first. If this is together, I'll be better as a father, as a man, and as a husband. Put the importance on your mental health. I'm not scared to talk about it anymore. The first tool is therapy. The second one is positive self-talk. And then journaling, putting your thoughts on paper. We have to redefine what being a strong man is and heal, love your mind.
And as the Trump administration seeks to renegotiate trade deals with the rest of the world, the stock market has seen increased volatility, sending panic among some investors. What do? Well, keep calm and keep your long-term goals in mind. This is what Lawrence Sprung says, founder of Midland Financial and author of Financial Planning Made Personal. And he joined NTD's Carrie Dunst. Take a look.
Now, last time you were with us, you told us that these last few weeks has been one of the highlights of your career. So before we jump into the advice, could you just give us a quick summary of what's actually taken place over the last month?
Yeah, it's been one for the record books thus far. It's been pretty interesting. I've been through a number of these downturns in my 25 plus year career. But the one interesting about this is it didn't start with any kind of economic issue. It really started with the implementation of policy, these tariffs. And, you know, as I've said ad nauseum over the last 25 years, markets can always deal with good news, obviously. They could also digest bad news. But the thing that they have a lot of trouble with is uncertainty. And that's the period we've been living in over the last several weeks.
Now, over the course of 365 days, you've explained to us previously that 10 days can really make or break your investment portfolio. So can you explain that phenomena?
Yeah, so if you look back to the year 2000, so the last roughly 25 years, the market, the S&P has averaged about 9.8%. But if you were unfortunate and decided to try to time the market and get out at the top or get in at the bottom, and you missed the 10 best days of the year, your return plummets really from 9.8% on average to minus 12.5%. So what that tells you is timing the market is really an act of futility. You have to make sure that your portfolio is positioned properly because you want to make sure that you are invested during those potentially 10 best days. And I think the ironic thing is if you look back historically speaking, the vast majority of those 10 best days come after some of the worst.
So interesting. Now, long-term investing, as you're alluding to, is about patience and compounding your interest. So what do you advise your clients who fear a down year in the markets could quash their financial goals?
Yeah, I think that down years are something that you have to expect as an investor, right? We can't go into making investments, whether it be for our retirement or child's education, and expect that every year is going to be a positive year. And, you know, the proof is in the pudding. The longer you stay invested, the higher likelihood that you are going to have a positive return. If you just invest for 1 year, you know, the likelihood drops significantly significantly, but the longer time horizon you have, the more likely you are going to get a positive return. And that's why, it's the old adage, time in the market. It's not about timing the market.
Yeah, let's explore that a little further, because whether it be stocks or real estate, people are always talking about trying to time the market to buy low and sell high. You're clearly advocating against that, and you're saying it's actually time in the market rather than timing the market. So can you go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you go on social media, there, you'll get an indication that basically there are some people out there that can completely time the bottom and time the top, and get out and get in when needed. But I would argue that they're probably not going to be around very long. They can get rid of their handle very easily, and you're no longer following them. So, it's proven fact that the longer you invest in the market, that the likelihood of your returns go up significantly. So, for example, if you are invested for 5 years, you have roughly an 80% chance that you're going to have a positive return over that 5-year period. At 10 years, it goes up to 90%, and at 20 years, you're almost at you're right at 100%. So, if you can invest for the long term, there's empirical evidence that shows that you'll see positive returns. But you have to also understand that the volatility is the price that we pay for those returns. So you have to be prepared that not every year is going to be a positive year, and that there are going to be some down years in your horizon. And I'm not saying that, going back to your 10-day example, I'm not saying that this year, although we've started on the downtrend, that we end there, because those 10 days could be ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think an important distinction is you seem to be laying out the differences between a true professional trader and someone who's an investor, and they're looking at, as you said, social media, and they read about somebody who is claiming to have timed the market. Can you make a little bit of a distinction between those two, and to encourage those who are truly investors to not gamble?
Yeah, I think most of the, your viewers here today are probably investors. They're not going to be professional traders. So, professional traders are people that this is what they do for their job day in and day out, and they're being paid to time the market. And in a lot of cases, they can't even do it. In recent years, you've seen a lot of what we call quant traders come out of the woodwork, which are basically algorithmic trading platforms that are now trying to time the market's tops and bottoms. Most of your viewers are investors, so they're investing for some goal in the future, whether it be retirement or making work optional, or sending their child to school, college, debt-free, or maybe buying that vacation home. So they should be aligning their investments with those various time horizons. So if their child, for example, is going to school in 10 years versus 18 years, those portfolios may look very different. And they have to align their portfolios in such a way that they can withstand some of the volatility that we've seen recently.
Yeah, you couldn't pretend to be a doctor, and if you're not a big data guy, maybe you shouldn't pretend to be a professional trader and stick with investing. Now, as we finish up, can you assuage people who have fears of a market correction?
Oh, I think we're in the midst of a market correction to some degree as we speak, and market corrections are totally normal. I mean, we typically average at least one market correction per year, and the average downside that we usually see around a 14% decline in the market. So, although we still have a long way to go this year, we're in the midst of that correction at the moment. I think, we're hinging on whether it gets a little bit worse or we get better. And a lot of that's going to depend on some of the policy that we see. Because if you are looking at the markets and seeing what's going on, a lot's hinging on that policy, depending on what's being said from one day to the next. So we might be in the midst of that. And what I would say is, for those people, going back to what we spoke earlier, that have that longer term time horizon, this could present a fantastic opportunity for them. Whereas, 6 months ago, the markets were significantly higher. And I think those people that are getting closer to one of those events, whether it's it's, buying that home or college or retirement, really need to be sitting down with their advisor and seeing if they're still on track or off track, and maybe making some minor adjustments, because sometimes those minor adjustments can lead to major improvements.
And now we would like to give a special mention to Eva Fu, who is a reporter for the Epoch Times newspaper and NTD sister media. So Friday night, Eva was honored for her work in exposing Communist China's practice of organ harvesting from people imprisoned for their spiritual beliefs. So Eva was selected by the Religion Communicators Council to receive a 2025 Wilbur Award for an investigative series titled Killing the Faithful for Organs, the brutal secret Beijing doesn't want exposed. The international award, given annually since 1949, is the top honor given by the organization. And Eva received the award at a ceremony last night in Salt Lake City, Utah. The Epoch Times journalist has devoted her reporting to religious freedom and human rights violations by the Chinese Communist Party. Her award-winning coverage highlighted the regime's ongoing practice of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, of which imprisoned members of the spiritual discipline Falun Dafa or Falun Gong are the primary victims. And Eva told NTD News, quote, "It's encouraging to see more recognition on this highly underreported issue." All right, we're going to take a break now. The Department of Government Efficiency says the records of millions of Social Security recipients aged 120 or older have been updated as part of a major cleanup at the Social Security Administration. Stay tuned.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
During high school, I hung with the wrong crowd and I never graduated.
I helped Santiago in many different ways, like all fathers do, because he always wanted to go to college.
I felt a little embarrassed to come back to school, but eventually, once I came here, I knew that it's for a bigger goal.
He was very dedicated, hardworking. He connected with his teachers. He connected with other students. That was one of the key reasons why he was able to keep forging ahead.
It was amazing to see him graduate. This was one thing that meant so much to him, and of course, it meant so much to us too.
With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed. That support is everything.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjiong Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
The Department of Government Efficiency said earlier this week that nearly 11 million Social Security records have now been updated. And joining us now to discuss this is Anthony LaBruna, Executive Director at the American Principles Project. So first of all, thank you very much for coming on this Sunday, Anthony. Talk to us. How did it happen that millions of Americans were listed as being 120 years old or even older sometimes in Social Security records?
Well, the work DOGE has conducted since the beginning of this administration just truly shows the incompetence and laziness of career civil servants. And with these new findings coming out from the Social Security Administration, truthfully, they're insulting to the American worker. For years, they've been told that there would not be enough left over in Social Security for them to retire on. And we've seen the average age of retirement go up 2 years from 65 to 67. And we've seen the government reaching in, taking more out of people's paychecks to deal with this incompetence. This should have never happened. You have an office with the Inspector General who is there to identify fraud and abuse and waste.
So what happened here? Are we talking about loopholes or failures that allowed these fraudulent or outdated records to persist for so long?
Well, I think most important to identify is that, the Inspector General of the Social Security Administration recognizes this as a flaw in the system. This is a major challenge for them, and it really shouldn't be. When you're dealing with the ages of, the average age of Americans when they pass away are between 75 and 80. And when you get to the age ranges of 120 and above, we're talking about, people who have been passed away, decades, even centuries. So I think it comes down to incompetence on the people who are working at these administrations, who are career civil servants. You can identify and look at the numbers when a check comes in and say, hey, this person is applied for Social Security and they're 147 years old. I think that's just downright laziness, saying, hey, this person shouldn't be on, or we have to do a check and see if this person's still alive.
Okay, let's talk about what DOGE is doing. Under the DOGE efforts, the SSA is undergoing workforce reductions. That's one of the aspects that's happening. Do you think this will be a net positive, or do you think fewer employees and office closures will negatively impact Americans?
Well, we've already seen this bloat, right? President Trump talked about this in 2016 with draining the swamp. The Social Security Administration spent $72 million over the last 7 years on improper payments. So with that huge workforce, they're already not taking the responsibility in going through these lists and cleaning them up. So by reducing the workforce there, I think it's going to put the pressure on the Social Security Administration to do their job, specifically the Inspector Generals. The reason DOGE has come in is to the failure of the Inspector General offices that are at every agency and department. They should have been cracking down on this fraud and abuse and identifying this years ago, but they did not. So I think this is a call of action to the Department of Justice to start investigating these IGs, some who have retired in the beginning of this administration, current and past, need to be investigated and say, why aren't you doing your job?
Okay, let's broadly talk about the sustainability aspect of Social Security. Do you think it is sustainable, keeping in mind that the worker to beneficiary ratio has been declining for years?
Well, if we're getting rid of this abuse, right, we're talking millions and millions of dollars, even billions of dollars of wasteful spending by the Social Security Administration, right? And they're digging deeper into American workers' pockets to fund this. You hear this from Congress a lot, where they're saying, we just don't have enough to keep this afloat. How can we keep this afloat if they're wasting billions of dollars on people who've been deceased for decades? So I think with these actions with DOGE, you're going to have a relief on the burden of paying staff, and more money can go to individuals, and you're getting rid of these 11 million people and more. I think that there will probably be more findings that will come out here in the future of getting rid of, people who have long been deceased. So I think if we do that and we take these next steps, you're going to see a huge burden lifted off the Social Security Administration of paying people who are actually dependent on Social Security checks.
But Anthony, it's hard for me to understand because lawmakers have had years of warnings. Why hasn't there been any meaningful action yet to shore up Social Security's finances?
I think that's a good question. It's the inspector generals. This is what their job is for. They're supposed to go in there and identify this fraud and abuse. So over the last 20 years, why was this not being done? You have inspector generals who were investigating my office when I was at the Office of White House Liaison at the Department of Commerce for trying to save money for the American taxpayer with wages and reducing staff in certain offices that was not necessary. So specifically, I would say this is doable. It is going to pay off in the long run. And sadly, DOJ has been the one who's had to go in and crack down. It should have been the inspector generals for the last 20 years. They haven't. Their job is to put trust for the American people in their government and their agencies. And again, I think it's laziness, incompetence, and quite frankly, negligence on their end.
Okay, so one point you made, I'm hearing you say that the ship has not sailed, that reform is still possible?
100% reform is still possible. If we're identifying this now, we can steer the ship in the right direction. We can make the proper cuts, which DOJ is already going and doing, right? And this is just one agency, and we're talking millions and billions of dollars. The U.S. government costs trillions of dollars to run. And if we're able to save the U.S. taxpayer millions and trillions of dollars through this effort, we can steer the ship in the right direction. Social Security is needed by a lot of Americans. And at the end of the day, it's up to us and the U.S. government to crack down and obviously spend the tax dollar wisely. And that hasn't happened. And now that we're seeing DOJ come in, they're going to be doing that. They're going to be putting the American worker first, the American family first. And so this ship obviously has not sailed. There's a lot more to be done. And, that's why Elon Musk and all these CEOs have volunteered their time to serve the American people.
Okay, just one final question. And broadly speaking, over the years, many Americans have asked this question in one form or another. Why is it so politically difficult to reform?
It's not politically difficult to reform. I think on both sides of the aisles, the question has been asked, where is our tax dollars going? And I think that the Washington swamp that, many presidents have campaigned on this, reducing fraud, everybody from Theodore Roosevelt to Barack Obama, but they didn't have the right individuals working alongside them to get this done. So because it's on both sides of the aisles and both voters, Democrats and Republicans, want to see change, I think it's somewhat popular. Again, this is a promise made and a promise kept by the Trump campaign. He's brought the right individuals in to make this happen, and I commend him and the administration for doing so.
All right, Anthony, once again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up after the break, how restoring lost beneficial bacteria to the gut could help stave off dementia. That and more when we come back.
Looking to refresh the style in your home? Here at Mathis Home, we can help you find exactly what you need during our spring style event. Whether you're looking for rustic farmhouse, classic, or modern and eclectic, we have all the latest looks that will leave your home feeling brand new. Whatever your style, we know that we can help you find it at the lowest price. Because not only do we want you to feel good in your home, we know that to earn your business, our prices have to be the best. So come to the spring style event at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
I'm Ilka. I live with my daughter and with my grandchildren. There's a sense of comfort that comes with eating a good meal. We try to make the most, of what we have. We have rent to pay, and then there are lights and there are gas. And while my daughter and I both work, it still just doesn't seem like there's enough to go around sometimes.
Every day, millions of our neighbors face hunger, including 1 in 5 children, and food costs keep rising. Please call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Your monthly support can fill plates with nutritious food for families across the country and in your community, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks and volunteers.
If you were over and playing with us, you were part of our family and you were going to eat. A real cook can take nothing and make something.
No one should ever have to wonder if they will have enough to eat, and our neighbors are working hard to feed their families every day. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger from coast to coast and in your own community. Use your credit card and you'll get this exclusive canvas grocery bag as a thank you for joining hands with people across America to help end hunger.
Some of the lessons that I hope that my family will take, it is important to treat people the way that you want to be treated. I have carried on the tradition of loving people through food.
Please call right now or go online to make a monthly gift at helpfeedingamerica.org. Your support helps our neighbors bring food home to their families.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
Welcome back. I'm joined in studio by Brendan Fallon, host and executive producer of NTD's Vital Signs, a health show that zooms in on important aspects of health that influence our lives. So, Brandon, it's good to see you again this week. So, what do you have for us this time?
Yeah, Don, these colonies of protozoa, fungi, bacteria that dwell within us, it's always spurred on my imagination. And I spoke to a doctor who was actually a cardiologist, 25 years, and when he started to see the tremendous improvements in heart health from people improving their gut health, he really started to focus on that side of health. And increasingly, dementia, Alzheimer's dementia is being looked at as a metabolic condition, and that's what I asked him about first. How could gut health influence a condition like dementia? And he answers that in terms of a condition called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And here he is explaining what that is.
Well, dementia is a work in progress, but there are several clear-cut culprits in causing dementia. One is this. So many of us have been overexposed to antibiotics and things that have disruptive effects on the gastrointestinal microbiome, like glyphosate, the herbicide Roundup, or stomach acid blocking drugs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or chlorinated drinking water, or preservatives in food, and many other things have disrupted the gastrointestinal microbiome. Net result, we've lost literally hundreds of beneficial species in the colon. When that happens, it allows the overproliferation of fecal microbes. These are microbes like E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter, which might ring familiar because they're also the microbes of food poisoning. When that kid flipping burgers at the fast food joint touches your food after not washing his hands after using the bathroom, you can get food poisoning from the same microbes. Point being, fecal microbes are not well tolerated outside of the colon, the most distal 4 to 5 feet of your gastrointestinal tract. So loss of many beneficial species in the colon, this has allowed the overproliferation of those fecal microbes that now have ascended into the 24 feet of small intestine in 1 out of 2 every American. So we're talking about 150 to 160 million plus people have this very peculiar issue of, we call it small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, fecal microbes proliferating in the small intestine. When they do that, the small intestine is poorly equipped to manage fecal microbes, trillions of them. They only live for a few hours. So there's enormous, rapid turnover of fecal microbes in the 24 feet of small intestine. They die, and they release their toxic compounds, such as endotoxin, that enters the bloodstream. Because that small intestine, very poorly protected, is also very permeable. That's where we absorb nutrients, like vitamins, minerals. So this endotoxin penetrates into the bloodstream. That's called endotoxemia. And we now know with good evidence, it's the driving factor in hundreds of health conditions. And one of the effects is that it inflames the brain. It causes so-called type 3 diabetes or insulin resistance in the brain, and is all highly toxic to the brain. It actually causes atrophy of various brain parts of your brain, like the hippocampus, one of the major parts of the brain affected with dementia.
So in the beginning there, he actually mentioned antibiotics. I'm just wondering, it's a very common medication, right? What is the impact on gut health when you ingest antibiotics?
Well, he's talking about it as something that can wipe out beneficial gut bacteria species. And his message is not, we shouldn't take antibiotics. He really emphasizes there are certain situations where antibiotics are needed, but people should realize that they do have this effect. And it's quite a common practice for a newborn baby might go through a series of different antibiotics, and it's not really considered as much as it should be, this effect that they can have.
Yeah, and it takes a while for the bacteria in your gut to replenish, right? It takes a bit.
It does, and it won't. If a species is lost, it's not necessarily going to come back. A lot of times, people are told by their doctors just take some yogurt, and that this will replenish it. But here, Dr. Davis is talking about one specific bacteria, beneficial bacteria, that can counter this fecal overgrowth from the small intestine.
Is this caused by the gut not ridding itself of fecal matter to the degree that it's supposed to? Is that the reason behind this?
No, it's more due to the loss of beneficial microbes that were suppressing the ascendance of those fecal microbes from the colon. So, for instance, there are species like one of my favorite microbes, Lactobacillus reuteri, Reuteri, named after the German microbiologist who discovered this interesting microbe in a breastfeeding German woman in 1962. In his 40-year academic career, at the beginning, he could find this in breast milk, stool, other places. As his career carried on, he couldn't find it anymore. And that has proven true in other studies. We've lost this very important species, Lactobacillus reuteri, and other species like Lactobacillus gasseri. Why is that important? Because these are species that are unique in that they colonize the small intestine. That's where this ascending infestation of fecal microbes occurs. So we've lost microbes that colonize the small intestine, and we've lost microbes that produce what are called bacteriocins. These are natural antibiotics effective in killing fecal microbes.
So Brandon, can you just talk real quick a little bit more about how to replenish some of these important bacteria?
Yeah, hope is not lost on. There are options out there. You can purchase probiotics to replenish, like L. reuteri that Dr. Davis is talking about there. And he has actually developed a way of gauging how effective you're being at eliminating SIBO, the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth that's connected to so many different diseases. And in that we discussed this in our full interview on Vital Signs on Epoch TV.
Right, and for anyone that wants to go directly to the full interview with Dr. Davis on Vital Signs, just type into your browser ept.ms/gut-repair, and you can watch the full interview. All right, next, Saturday was National Prescription Drug Takeback Day. Officials say cleaning out the medicine cabinet and discarding medications you no longer need can remove the threat of potential harm. In today's Health Minute, Mandy Gator has more on which medications are most dangerous to keep unused in your home.
It's a leading cause of injury and death in U.S. adults. Drug overdoses killed more than 105,000 Americans in 2023, according to the latest CDC data. But there's a way to make sure unused pills don't make it into the wrong hands.
Prescription medications, it can be very difficult to predict how dangerous they are if people take them when they're not prescribed specifically for them.
Dr. David Stream with the Alcohol and Drug Recovery Center at Cleveland Clinic says many times people who have opiate use disorder don't get pills from the street, but from the medicine cabinets of family and friends. He says it's also important to properly dispose of unused or expired medications to keep pets and young children safe.
Some really tragic things can happen.
Stream says some of the most concerning medications to properly discard are those with an overdose or toxicity risk. That includes pain medications, sedating drugs like sleeping and anti-seizure medicines, but also blood pressure medication.
People can take those who don't really need them. Blood pressure, heart rate drop dramatically, and people can become very critically ill very quickly.
An easy way to properly dispose of unused medicine is by taking part in National Prescription Drug Takeback Day on Saturday.
Look through your old medications and get rid of the stuff that you don't need anymore.
To find a take-back center closest to you, go to dea.gov/takebackday. And that's all for today's this hour, and we'll come back with more.